Welcome to the M.O.W channel. Today, we're going to talk about the Peterborough ditch murders, a serial killing case that took place in Cambridgeshire, England in 2013. It's a rare case where a female offender targeted only men. Please hit the subscribe and like buttons. Now, let's begin today's story. In March 2013, the county of Cambridgeshire appeared calm on the surface, but underneath that quiet, a woman named Joanna Christine Dennehy was nurturing an uncontrollable desire for violence and murder. This chapter looks deeply into Dennehy's background, her psychological state, and the victims who ultimately fell under her control. Dennehy was born in August 1982 in St Albans, Hertfordshire, and grew up in nearby Harpenden. She was a mother of two, but emotionally she was far from what most people would consider maternal or responsible. Her inner world was deeply fractured, and her life had been marked by violence and reckless behavior. Long before the murders ever took place. Prior to her killing spree, she had already been convicted of assault and of keeping dangerous dogs, which placed her under supervision by the probation service. This system was supposed to help control her explosive tendencies and prevent her from reoffending. Ironically, the weaknesses of this system became one of the main reasons Dennehy was able to commit such brutal crimes. According to findings revealed after the trial, the probation officers assigned to her were inexperienced and failed to properly assess or manage the true danger she posed. Dennehy was skilled at hiding her issues and manipulating authorities, classic traits of someone with severe antisocial personality features. Because she hated being controlled, the loose oversight only gave her more freedom and power. Dennehy's mental state was far beyond simple instability. During the trial, psychiatrists diagnosed her with psychopathic, antisocial, and borderline personality disorders. These diagnoses meant she lacked empathy, felt no guilt or remorse, acted impulsively, and experienced sudden emotional swings. Her psychopathic traits in particular played a key role in how she experienced murder as a source of excitement, pleasure, and a way to assert power. To her, killing wasn't a moral boundary, it was entertainment, a way to break up the boredom of life and prove her dominance. Dennehy's urge to kill was focused specifically on men. She told a friend, Mark Lloyd, that she didn't want to kill women, especially women with children. Instead, she held a warped fantasy of becoming like Bonnie and Clyde, except she wanted to kill 9 men. This choice suggests a mix of deep resentment toward men or unresolved anger, rooted somewhere in her past or psychological makeup. For Dennehy, men weren't just victims, they were targets she could dominate and destroy for pleasure. Her 3 victims came from different backgrounds, but all were closely tied to her personal life. Lucas Slabszewski, believed to be her first victim, was a Polish immigrant connected to Dennehy through drinking and drug use. He stepped into her dangerous world and eventually paid for it with his life. Kevin Lee, a property developer, was both Dennehy's landlord and her lover. That complex mix of roles, landlord, tenant, and romantic partner, gave Dennehy psychological and material control over him. John Chapman, her roommate, lived with her daily and was the closest person to her in everyday life. All 3 lived within Dennehy's daily orbit, and each became a target for her need to exert control. Sometime between March 19 and March 29, 2013, Dennehy murdered Lucas Slabszewski, marking the violent beginning of what would become known as the Peterborough ditch murders. Even in covering up the crime, Dennehy displayed chilling cruelty. She placed his body in a trash bin, and shockingly, even brought a 14-year-old girl she knew to show her the corpse. This showed that Dennehy wasn't trying to hide her crime, she used it as something to boast about, something to shock others with. For Dennehy, the first murder was like opening a forbidden door. She later told a psychiatrist that after the first killing, she had gotten a taste for it, and that it made her want to do it again. By this point, her violent impulses were already released into the world, and no one was in a position to predict or stop what she might do next. The failures of the probation service, combined with Dennehy's extreme psychological instability, created the tragic beginning of a serial murder case that would shock the entire UK. Joanna Dennehy's killing spree erupted with explosive intensity over just 10 days, from March 19 to March 29, 2013. After murdering her first victim, Lucas Slabszewski, Dennehy was overtaken by an uncontrollable desire to kill. She referred to her serial murders as entertainment, and she had no intention of stopping this deadly game. During this period, her actions displayed both extreme coldness and calculated brutality. Immediately after killing Slabszewski, she had already chosen her next 2 victims and moved quickly to carry out her plan. On March 29, Dennehy murdered 2 more men in a single day: Kevin Lee, her landlord and lover, and John Chapman, her roommate. Although both were part of her daily life, this familiarity only made the killings easier for her, providing physical access and reinforcing her sense of psychological dominance. All 3 victims were stabbed to death, indicating a violent and highly direct method. The victim suffered fatal abdominal wounds, suggesting that Dennehy wanted to assert her physical control in face-to-face confrontations. After the killings, Dennehy's behavior diverged sharply from that of a typical criminal, trying to conceal evidence. In the process of disposing of the bodies, she added grotesque actions that exposed her warped psychology. Most notably, before abandoning Kevin Lee's body in a ditch near M.O.W, she dressed the corpse in a black sequin dress. This act went far beyond hiding evidence. It resembled a final ritual of control over her victim, underscoring that her crimes were rooted not in anger or gain, but in pathological pleasure and sadistic impulses. Lee's body was discovered the next day, and on April 3, the bodies of Slabsevsky and Chapman were also found in ditches near Thorney. Because the three bodies were located near drainage ditches, the media dubbed the case the Peterborough Ditch Murders. After the three murders, Dennehy shared her satisfaction with her accomplice, Gary Stretch, who assisted her and helped dispose of the bodies. She told him, "I want my fun. I want you to get me my fun," making it clear that her motive was pure, unfiltered lust for killing. Together, Dennehy and Stretch fled from the Cambridgeshire area toward Hereford in Western England. For Dennehy, this escape was the next level of her deadly game. Her urge to kill was not limited by geography or personal ties. Upon arriving in Hereford, she carried out random, indiscriminate attacks to maintain a sense of control and demonstrate her power. On April 2, she selected two completely unknown men on the street, both of them simply out walking their dogs, and stabbed them separately. She even stole the second man's dog, in a bizarre act that defied rational explanation. Fortunately, both victims survived. These attacks revealed that Dennehy's violent impulses were now entirely out of control, and she had fully immersed herself in the fantasy role of a serial killer. Her earlier confession to Mark Lloyd that she dreamed of killing 9 men had now evolved into real, indiscriminate murder attempts. Her crimes expanded from eastern to western England, creating an immediate and widespread threat to the public. During this phase, another man reluctantly traveled with Dennehy and Stretch in their car, though he was later cleared of involvement in the attacks. His presence suggests that Dennehy and Stretch were actively seeking out potential helpers or passive bystanders they could intimidate or manipulate into joining their crimes. Dennehy took pleasure in controlling others and instilling fear, using those behaviors to reinforce her fantasies of power. Over the course of 10 days, 3 murders, 2 attempted murders, and a cross-country flight, Joanna Dennehy transformed from an ordinary citizen into one of the most dangerous serial killers in modern British history. This phase of the case demonstrated that her mental state had moved entirely beyond the control of social norms or moral restraint, setting the stage for the next major escalation, a massive police pursuit and her eventual capture. Joanna Dennehy's desperate flight came to an end when she was arrested in Hereford following an attempted random killing, but the crisis surrounding her was far from over. In fact, her desire for control and her antisocial tendencies erupted in new forms within the judicial system and prison environment, creating extreme and ongoing danger. From her arrest on April 2, 2013, to her trial at London's Old Bailey and even afterward, Dennehy was classified as one of the most dangerous inmates in the United Kingdom. At the time of her arrest, Dennehy showed no remorse or guilt for her crimes. Instead, during police questioning, she openly declared, "I want to kill more," clearly revealing her continued threat. This attitude demonstrated that Dennehy still believed she maintained control, even within the criminal justice system. For her, being arrested was not the end of the game, it was merely the beginning of a new stage. The most shocking crisis arose before her trial even began, while she was imprisoned at Prison Bronzefield, a category of women's prison in Surrey. There, she devised a bold and chilling escape plan that exposed her extreme brutality and meticulousness. Prison staff discovered detailed notes and diary entries outlining the plan, and were horrified by what they found. Dennehy's escape attempt went far beyond simply climbing over a wall. She planned to murder or severely injure a prison officer and cut off one of the officer's fingers. Her goal was to use the severed finger to trick the prison's biometric security scanners and gain access to an exit route. This plan illustrated the depth of Dennehy's psychopathic need for control and how monstrously it manifested. To her, the officers were not human beings, but dispensable tools to be sacrificed for her freedom. The incident posed a grave threat to prison security and staff safety, proving that Dennehy's danger had not diminished at all even behind bars. After the escape plan was uncovered, prison authorities placed her in solitary confinement from September 2013 to September 2015, a full 2 years. Though this was an unavoidable measure, given her extreme risk, Dennehy used it to create yet another crisis. She claimed that solitary confinement left her crying and angry, leading to self-harm, and sued the High Court, on grounds that her human rights had been violated. Dennehy argued that her segregation violated Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights. However, government lawyers countered that given the nature of her crimes, 3 murders and a violent plan to kill an officer for escape, her segregation was necessary and proportionate to protect public safety. Justice Singh dismissed Dennehy's claim, ruling that solitary confinement had been necessary and proportionate at all critical times. This legal battle marked yet another attempt by Dennehy to drain judicial resources and assert control, even while imprisoned. These events show that Joanna Dennehy is not merely a criminal, but a dangerously uncontrollable figure who poses a constant threat throughout the justice and prison systems. Her inherent violence and desire to inflict suffering on others persisted even behind thick prison walls, and her very presence remains an ongoing warning and crisis for the UK criminal justice system. This unrelenting danger ultimately contributed to her receiving a whole life order, the most severe sentence possible in the country. In February 2014, Joanna Dennehy's trial reached its climax at the historic Old Bailey Criminal Court in London. This courtroom, steeped in the weight of British judicial history, became the stage for Dennehy's shocking displays of apathy and cynicism. Although she had already pleaded guilty in November 2013 to 3 murders and 2 additional attempted murders, the speed and abruptness of her plea stunned her defense team, her family, and the public. Her sister Maria interpreted the sudden guilty plea as Dennehy's attempt to assert control and show everyone that she was the boss. For Dennehy, the courtroom was not a place for remorse, it was one last opportunity to display her need for domination. Throughout the trial, Dennehy maintained a complete lack of remorse. Observers reported seeing her smile during proceedings, causing further anguish and insult to the victims' families. When questioned about her decision to plead guilty, she responded curtly and cynically, "I pleaded guilty and that's it," making her emotional detachment unmistakably clear. Her responses demonstrated to both the court and the public that her psychopathic personality left no room for normal human emotion or moral boundaries. At one point, Dennehy revealed an even bolder expression of her need for control. She suddenly stood up and shouted directly at the presiding judge, "Justice Spencer, I don't want to be controlled by anyone. I don't want to be controlled by a lawyer, by the police, by anyone." This outburst was not merely an expression of anger, it was a declaration of dominance in the face of the highest symbol of authority. For Dennehy, pleading guilty was a calculated move to speed through the process and maintain the illusion that she was deciding her own fate. On February 28, 2014, Justice Spencer delivered the final and ultimate sentence. He imposed a whole life order, Britain's most severe punishment, ensuring that Dennehy would spend the rest of her life in prison with no possibility of parole. During sentencing, Justice Spencer described her as a cruel, calculating, selfish, and manipulative serial killer, stating the judiciary's firm and final judgment of her crimes. The justification for the sentence was unequivocal. The judge emphasized that her murders were premeditated and carried out purely for pleasure and entertainment. He also accepted psychological assessments describing her as a sadomasochist, lacking the spectrum of normal human emotions. Given her extreme likelihood of reoffending and her complete absence of remorse, Justice Spencer concluded that Dennehy should never be released under any circumstances. The whole life order reflects the harshest penalty available in the UK legal system and mandates lifelong incarceration without parole. This sentence holds historic significance in British criminal history. Joanna Dennehy became only the 3rd woman in the UK to receive a whole life order, following the infamous Moors murderer Myra Hindley in the 1960s and serial killer Rosemary West in the 1990s. Her inclusion on this rare list is itself proof of how extraordinarily brutal and socially intolerable her crimes were. Sentences were also handed down for the accomplices who aided Dennehy's murderous spree. Gary Richards, who assisted her flight and participated in attempted murder, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 19 years. Leslie Layton, who obstructed justice and helped dispose of bodies, was sentenced to 14 years. Robert Moore, who admitted assisting an offender, received a 3-year sentence. These convictions show that Dennehy successfully manipulated and drew others into her crimes, contaminating her surroundings with her desire for control. Thus, the judicial process reached its dramatic conclusion, delivering final judgment on Dennehy's actions and affirming that justice had been served for the people of the United Kingdom. With Joanna Dennehy sentenced to a whole life order, the most severe punishment in the British justice system, her public killing spree came to an end, but her story did not. After receiving her life sentence, Dennehy was transferred back to prison Bronzefield, where she began serving her term. Within those thick walls, her desire for control and her antisocial personality disorder surfaced again in new and disturbing ways. This final chapter focuses on her life behind bars, her continued deviant behavior, the systemic issues within the prison system, and the broader societal reflections. Her case forced the UK to confront. Dennehy's life in prison was far from ordinary. Even in confinement, she consistently displayed her need to assert dominance and maintain control over her environment. One of the most controversial incidents occurred when she declared her intention to marry her cellmate, Hayley Palmer. In 2018, Dennehy requested permission from prison authorities to marry Palmer, a revelation that shocked the public and Palmer's family. Palmer's relatives expressed deep concern, fearing Dennehy's dangerous influence and the potential harm she could inflict. A romantic relationship, and especially a marriage between a serial killer and another offender, was widely interpreted as yet another method for Dennehy to manipulate those around her and maintain psychological control. The instability of this relationship soon escalated. Reports emerged that in 2018, Dennehy and Palmer entered into a suicide pact and attempted to take their own lives. The incident exposed serious weaknesses in the prison's mental health management and supervision of high-risk inmates. Then in May 2021, further reports indicated that the two still intended to marry, suggesting that their relationship was not momentary, but rather a long-term source of psychological entanglement and control. Separate reports from June 2020 revealed that Dennehy was also involved with another inmate, M.O.W, who had been convicted of murder and was serving a 12-year sentence. The fact that Dennehy repeatedly formed relationships with other violent offenders highlighted how her antisocial traits had not diminished within the prison system. Instead, they seemed strengthened by the presence of similarly dangerous individuals. Dennehy's threatening behavior extended beyond personal relationships. In 2019, when she was transferred to Low Newton Prison in County Durham, allegations surfaced that she had threatened to kill another notorious serial killer already housed there, Rosemary West. Although government officials formally denied the claim, the rumor alone underscored Dennehy's reputation. She was widely regarded as one of the most dangerous female inmates in the UK, confirming how difficult it was for the prison system to manage violent offenders who remained threats even in captivity. Yet the most sobering part of this story lies in the systemic failures revealed after her sentencing. At the time of her murders, Dennehy was under the supervision of the probation service due to previous convictions involving assault and owning a dangerous dog. An independent review conducted after the trial discovered that the probation officers responsible for monitoring her were inexperienced and failed to recognize or properly manage her extreme antisocial personality disorder and latent violence. This was not a minor administrative oversight, it was a catastrophic failure of public safety. Had the probation service properly assessed her risk and imposed stricter controls or mandatory treatment, the lives of 3 innocent men might have been spared. The case raised urgent questions about how the UK identifies and manages high-risk offenders. It exposed weaknesses in offender supervision, prison safety, and the monitoring of criminals with psychopathic tendencies. The Dennehy case left behind a tragic legacy that highlighted the frailty of the systems meant to protect the public. Though Joanna Dennehy will spend the rest of her life in prison, her existence and the system's failure to contain her before she killed remains a lasting lesson and unresolved burden for British society. That's all for today's story. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We'll return tomorrow with another new case and mystery. Thank you for watching.